So let's understand what's happening with the hardware buffer size. Sometimes you get an error that says Pro Tools has too many plugins, you have to change the hardware HW buffer size, something like that. Sometimes you get that error. So what does that mean? So if you go to Setup, Playback Engine, you'll see that this is HW buffer size, hardware buffer size, and then you can change the numbers. So why do you want that? So the first problem with hardware buffer size is that you have what's called latency. When you're recording performers through a mic or direct input, sometimes it's a little bit of a delay. A drummer hits the drum, and then they hear the drum hit in their headphones, like just a split second later. So it's a bit of a delay. So tap and then tap, hit, 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 hit. It's kind of annoying. Singers sing and then they hear it slightly afterwards. So that's called latency. So that's one problem. Second problem is a computer will really struggle when you're editing and you have lots of plugins like reverb and echo and lots of instruments, virtual instruments in the computer. So the computer really slows down and has a lot of problems. So what should you do? Well, you need to adjust the hardware buffer size according to what your needs are. There's no magic number. You just have to adjust it. So H/W means hardware, and buffer. Buffer, think of it as a bucket of water. All right. So here you have a bucket of water, and in this case, it's a bucket of sound. So sound comes in, and sound comes out. Comes in at the top, and sound comes out at the bottom. Okay. So what comes out is through your headphones or speakers, whatever you have. What's coming in is through the microphone. Latency occurs when the sound that's coming in is not exactly the same as the sound coming out. So this comes in, it has to sit in the buffer before it comes out. And this buffer is what the computer chews on and works to process the sound before it sends it to your headphones. Okay? So the bigger the bucket, the bigger the latency. The smaller the bucket, the smaller the latency. Right? So if you have a smaller bucket, then the sound coming in and the sound coming out is virtually the same thing. Right? So what we have, this is a big latency problem. This is a small latency problem. Less echo here, a lot of echo here. Okay, so how do we fix that? For live recordings, whenever you have a microphone or not instruments like the boom, the virtual instruments in the computer like the boom, the mini grand, and so on, but you actually have a mic or a guitar plugged into the system, right? You don't want to have that latency. So what you have when you have if you have a large buffer size, you just have the wrong technique here. Don't do that. Okay? So whenever you're doing live, you got to go to Pro Tools, Setup Engine, Playback Engine, Setup, Playback Engine, like this. And you're going to get this setting for the HW buffer size. Okay? You want to change it to a small setting, either 32 or 64 for small latency. And here's the drawback. Your computer will have to work really hard to process all that audio that's coming in. So that's why your computer fan might suddenly turn on and so on. But that's kind of a give and take. You have small latency, but computer works harder. Okay? So a slow computer, if you have a lot of mic inputs, would be really hard to deal with 16 mics coming in. All right? So it depends on your computer too. When should you use a large hardware buffer size? When is that a good idea? So when you're done when you're done recording and you're just mixing and editing, the computer, you don't want the computer to have to work so hard, so you give it a large buffer size. So what it's doing is that it's taking a big chunk of audio that you send to it, with a large buffer, and then it chews on that audio, spits it out at you, right? Because what comes in doesn't really matter about what comes out. There's no latency in your recording that you're worried about. So the idea is you want to have a large bucket of stuff for the computer to chew on. Okay? So latency doesn't matter when you're recording, but it does matter when you're editing. Sorry, did I say that right? Latency is not relevant when it comes to editing. That's right. Okay. So how do you change that? Well, you go to hardware setup playback engine, and then you go to the hardware buffer size and you make it one of these numbers, 512 or 1020, 1024. This is only for mixing or editing. So for live recording, smaller buffer size to reduce latency. For editing and mixing, larger buffer size. Okay?